Welcome to the Harvest Ministry Network Leadership Podcast with Ron and Jennifer Eivaz. Ron and Jen have pastored for almost 30 years at Harvest Church based in Turlock, California. Today's topic is really critical. It's about longevity in ministry and finishing well. Join us now.
The other part I think many times we don't talk about in ministry is the emotional growth. You know, you can't just spiritually grow. You got to emotionally be healthy and growing. You want to talk about that?
Well, the emotional side of it, you know, it has to do with what's going on with your heart. And here's the thing: there's things that we have to deal with, and it comes around for everybody. I don't know anybody that it doesn't. Stuff you grew up with, you have to deal with that because those are like seeds that are waiting to sprout, waiting to harvest, things that are unresolved from childhood. But here's the thing: in ministry, things happen in life, things happen in ministry, and you still have to work through that and make sure those things don't shut down your heart. So emotional growth and emotional health is continuous in ministry. And it's one of those things that it needs to be part of your discipline. You need to have some sort of plan for emotional growth, even if it's, I just need a once a month counseling appointment so I can just, you know, spill it all out. I don't know how you guys operate. For me, I'm surprised, but I discovered I am an external processor. I have to talk it all the way through and even say it as ugly as I need to say it. But once I've said it, I'm done. It's almost like I've emptied the garbage out of my heart, and then I'm done. I'm over it. And so you have to find out what works for you in that regard, you know, how to get it out of your system, how to get it so things don't sit in you, because you'll end up being, you know, 55, 65, and all of a sudden this bitter thing is coming out of you and you're starting to get bitter as you get old. Have you ever seen an older bitter person?
Never.
You know,
definitely not in church.
Yeah, it is interesting because when they're younger, they can kind of cover it up because they look cute or, you know, whatever. But when they're older,
nobody looks cute bitter.
When they're older, you know, they've got the face to match the bitter, right? And so, you know, so we don't want to be those kind of people, you know, and so you have to know how you work, and then you have to create something around that accordingly. My plan is not going to be your plan, but you need to do something that works.
And you have to keep in mind, ministry is not designed to make you healthy.
No.
Right. So if you're in a healthy church and everybody just loves each other, you're just going to automatically be healthy. It doesn't work that way. Ministry is hard work. You go through things, through challenges. I mean, think about it for a moment. A pastor goes through more stresses in 1 week than most people go through in a year. Right. Because we're just dealing with everybody else's life situations. And so you have to, what other people do to emotionally stay healthy is not enough for you to stay healthy. No. Right. So you have to go to a whole nother level of that. So, you know, the counseling, you know, having good friends you could talk to, just working on your own stuff, you know, right ways of thinking. I mean, emotional health is so important. And again, because ministry is not designed to make you or keep you healthy, anything that you have carried in from your childhood or upbringing or whatever, it comes out to a greater degree because the squeeze is on. I think more intensely.
It's bigger. It's a bigger squeeze. Thankfully, that if you work through it, it ends up being something that God uses for good. You're able to speak into it and address it from a knowledgeable place because you actually know the road out. So I have found that God will definitely work it for good. It's no fun going through that. The other thing I've noticed, especially in the last 5 years, is we've had to challenge our thinking. We've had to really do some intentional things to expand our thinking, expand how we think.
Give an example.
Well, for example, we just started listening to people like Sam Chand and Rochelle and, you know, some of these leader guru type people, not necessarily, you know, in a way where we're following their systems and structures totally. It's just more like to get a thought process, just to see how people think, because we're finding that how to grow at this level is requiring us to learn some things that we never learned before, and to listen from some people who know those structures. And those are
Some
some
things you might have even criticized 10 years ago.
Yeah, and those are things that we're actually going to talk more about in some future monthly Zooms. But actually challenging the way you think, reading a book that normally you wouldn't read.
Yeah.
Listening to a podcast that normally that's not a person you would listen to. It might be a popular podcast, but it's not the type of person you listen to. Anything to get yourself to think a little different, or even if you don't agree, well, why don't you agree?
Yeah.
And just to establish that. And I have found for myself, that's something that I've been doing on a regular basis, and really going outside of what I normally would like to eat, and just listening and examining to those things and letting myself grow, just because I'm growing my thinking. I'm just kind of seeing what's out there. And that's something I really encourage you, because that will start breaking some barriers for you, because it's in your mind.
And that's one of the things actually we have on here in regards to growth is you have to mentally grow.
Yeah.
You have to grow your mindset, right? So that's different than your emotional health, because you could have a lot of good thinking, but emotionally be all a mess. But you could be emotionally doing okay, but you also have to grow your mindset.
Right. Let me give you an example. I just for fun, when I was in New Zealand, Chantel and I, after we did our ministry all day, we would watch Jesse Duplantis, old Jesse Duplantis videos at night, just because it was something we wanted to listen to. All right. So, and of course he's talking about his airplanes and all of that, and it's so controversial. And so he was talking about that, but he was saying, it's interesting how pastors will spend millions and millions on a building because that's what they need to minister. And he says, I'm an evangelist. I need an airplane, just like a pastor needs a building. Okay, now whether you agree with that or not,
golf clubs.
Yeah, whether you agree with that or not, my whole thing was like, I don't even consider an airplane. I don't even have like the heart. I don't even have the capacity for an airplane. And I'm not saying that's where I'm going, but I was like, it's interesting to me. Like I'm completely shut down in my capacity in certain areas because I've never even put it in front of me for consideration. Yeah. So expansion, a lot of it for me is I have to expose myself to a bigger arena, bigger environment, bigger minds.
So the important thing about mindsets is you have to find out how people who are a few steps ahead of you, how do they think? And one of the things I always tell our staff is, when you go to conferences, when you get around people who are further ahead than you, don't just sit there and ask, how do you do this? Or how do you do things? I think that's our tendency. We want to get around people who are maybe a few steps ahead of us. And we say, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you do that? Which is great to learn. But that's not what's going to really help you, because what they do in their context doesn't apply. It doesn't always apply to your context.
No.
But if you could ask the question, how do you think about that? When you made that decision, what was your thought process? Because if you could get into people's thinking and how they think about things, then you could figure out the solutions to things at that level, because for your context and what you're dealing with. But how to think is way more important than how to do something. So I think that's so important. And the last one, and this is probably one for you to take, is your physical health.
Right.
Is because she does a lot better job with that than I do. But even the last whatever years, quite a few years actually, I've had to deal more with my physical health. And I think the older you get, the more that becomes important. And it actually is important for you to start early. It's hard to catch up what you neglect on. But your physical health, and the reason your physical health is so important. Well, one, for me, I think especially at this point, for me to have the energy to do what I need to do, I have to be in shape. I have to be in better shape. And even, preaching 3 times on Sundays, wears you out. I know pastors who are worn out preaching 1 time on Sunday. Try doing it 3 times between campuses. And so you have to be in good shape. But even the clarity of how you think is connected to what you eat and how you take care of yourself.
Well, I could do a whole session on this alone. The quick version has to do with, if you're going to have that energy, if you're actually going to successfully resist temptation, you have to have physical strength. Because when you are weak physically,
And not just for temptation for ice cream.
yeah, you know,
Right.
really it is. Especially, and you know, because I do international ministry, which again, these are just topics that I'll say for another time. That's a whole different ball game. If you start dealing with international stuff, you're dealing with international spirits, and that is those are strong things that you have to know how to do. If you are physically weak, you do not have the resistance that you need to have to do those kind of things. If your church is growing and expanding, and there's a lot of pressure in the growth from the outside, it looks awesome. You know, internally, it's grueling. Okay, because you're having to carry quite a bit and do work through a lot of transitions and just a lot of decisions. You have to have the physical strength. So that means you have to have the lifestyle of eating properly. You have to have lifestyle of exercise, you know, and you can start as an older person. I'm seeing videos all the time of these older ladies who just look amazing. You know, I mean, they look aged, but you know, they just decide to get fit like when they're 70. Okay. So, and they look great and they've got energy. You can, you know, pick it up.
And you're not trying to look like somebody else.
No,
so you have
no,
to say,
no.
what does healthy look for you?
Exactly.
I think sometimes when we think of health, we think of weight loss and all sorts of stuff. That's not what it's about. It's about what does healthy look for you.
Right.
Anyway, we could go forever on this.
I could.
Each of these points, we could go forever, but we want to take a few moments to answer your question.
Okay.
So, question from Michelle. So, if you have a question, get it in there quick because we're not going to be here for a long time. But from Michelle, do you think it's a battle to finish well, or is there an ease to it because you're solid in your decision to do so?
Is there a battle to finishing well? Here's what I would say is there's always going to be challenges to you finishing. But it's kind of like your marriage. You know, you commit to your marriage, you go through those seasons. Every marriage goes through those seasons.
What season?
You know, the seasons
Okay.
of you know, learning how to get along with each other, especially if you're both
Not have to share a sink.
yeah, both stronger personalities. And so there's a season where, you know, you have to decide and you commit to it, even though it's not comfortable.
Thanks for joining us today. Are you a minister looking for leadership resources and a like-minded community? Visit hmnetwork.org to learn about membership and credentialing opportunities.